All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another YOGUs. So it has been a while, but as I am preparing for the primary weapon review, we have some important stuff to talk about. That being a primary weapon that I have honestly been sleeping on. That being the Kuva Ogris. I was plain and simple not giving this weapon enough credit, and it has recently gotten better as Primed Firestorm was not too long ago. So we have some builds here to talk about. And before we get into what those builds are, it's really important to note that because this is a Kuva weapon, obviously it says that it is MR15, but as we saw in the free-to-play through very recently, you can kill Kuva Liches as early as like MR6 or 7. So this MR15 requirement, you can bypass that just by killing the Lich, which is very easy to do, as long as you are even kinda geared or have a friend to help you out, which I think are pretty easy things to do. So this weapon is very accessible to much earlier on players. For that, we are going to be doing 2 builds for this weapon to show how it is for those newer players that aren't going to have a setup that looks like this one. So this is fully maxed out, as you'd expect. These weapons want 5 Forma in order to get all the mastery out of them, and because of that, this weapon is going to be invested most times by anyone who's doing completionist stuff anyway. So we have a bunch of extra points here. You definitely don't need to format it this much if you just want to get this build in here so that you can use it. But this build is a unique primary weapon build, which we almost never see. Almost never. But this weapon is using 2 unique mods that other weapons aren't using. Those being Primed Firestorm and Nightwatch Napalm. Now, Primed Firestorm improves the blast radius of weapons with radial attacks, plus 66% blast radius. And Nightwatch Napalm is specifically for the Ogresses, and this makes rockets disperse napalm, which inflicts 30% of damage over 6 seconds across a 90% of the explosion area. Really important linchpin of this weapon being good. Primed Firestorm works with Nightwatch Napalm, making the area for Nightwatch Napalm much larger and like really, really useful. The rest of this build is nothing particularly special. It's just, we're building for viral heat like you do. We have Vigilante supplies in here because ammo can sometimes be a consideration on the Ogris, and this gives us unlimited ammo and occasionally a small damage bonus. The only other thing that's worth noting is that if you're planning on using this weapon in lower levels, it is a to-taste thing to switch from Serration to Heavy Caliber. They have the same damage bonus, but the negative accuracy can sometimes be a benefit, and in low levels, it technically has a larger area, in quotation marks, for Nightwatch Napalm, which can kill more enemies, theoretically. Personally, I really like the ability to just know where my rockets are going, because they're just going to shoot in a straight line with Serration and be super, super predictable. But if you would rather go a little bit more mayhem and possibly a little bit of an upside, Heavy Caliber is also a perfectly fine option in this build. So now for this, what can this build do? The answer is actually kind of any regular enemies. This build is going to be totally fine. Usually we would show off level 50 stuff, but because this weapon is so easy to use and actually really effective, even with Test Cal, I'm going to show it off at level 100, which is going to be, just generally sortie 3 level enemies where you might want a weapon like this. So with the Ancients, they're going to take a little second to burn away, and definitely the Heavy Gunners are the thing this has the most trouble with, but you can see they'll just get torched by the fire procs if you just give them a second. And then besides that, we have all these like little regular enemies. You can see just how big the blast radius is here. And these enemies are not really a problem. Because of the huge AoE and also that this goes through walls, you can kind of just shoot it willy-nilly, and as long as the enemies are in kind of the vicinity of where you're firing, you're going to be just fine. And it's going to just absolutely torch these enemies out and just shred house. Like, you could just fire it down hallways, and it'll figure it out for you. And that's actually really, really useful, and maybe one of the most useful things that you can put in your primary slot right now. Now, the nice thing about this is that this is a Kuva weapon. So even though this is an MR15 weapon on paper, because it comes from a Kuva Lich, you can get this, as we saw with me doing it in the free-to-play through, you can get this as early as like MR6 or 7. realistically. As long as you're either, planning to fight a Lich and like building the items that you would want to have in order to do that, or if you've got one friend or someone you can ask to help you kill a Lich, you can have access to this weapon very, very early before you get access to a lot of other stuff. For that, you're not going to have access to this super invested turbo build right here. You're not going to have rank 10 primed cryo rounds. You're not going to have primed firestorm. You're probably not even going to have a fully leveled Serration. So for that, we have this budget build. Now, this budget build is actually only requiring 2 Forma from you, which is very, very low. And the only stuff that's actually kind of difficult to get in this build is Nightwatch Napalm. Firestorm, really, really cheap mod to trade for. It's only like 2 platinum. And with the primed one, nobody's really caring too much that regular Firestorm is a thing that exists, but it's still what I would put into this build. So this is a super accessible mod. And then Nightwatch Napalm. So this is the part of the video where I tell you, if you're a new player, please farm this if you can and sell it. Because as of the filming of this video, Nightwatch Napalms are 25 plus platinum a piece, and they come from Keladithame on Sedna, and they are not hard to farm if you know what you're doing at all. So heads up that this is really expensive for no reason, I guess because no one wants to farm Kela, but it's pretty easy to farm. The price could go up or down. I don't know if this video will affect that, but Nightwatch Napalm is hilariously expensive for kind of no real reason, probably just because people aren't farming it as of right now. For that, though, this build only has Serration at rank 6. It is worth noting that if you are forming this the 2 times and you do 1 for Split Chamber and 1 for Serration, you can actually increase the rank of Serration 2 more times and it'll still fit on a 2 Forma build. So that is super, super good. It makes this even more accessible, even if you're at your rank 8, which is where a lot of like more mid-tier players will probably stop on their Serration. And with that, also, obviously, 1 more Forma. This comes with a dash polarity in its Exilus slot. So if you have an Exilus adapter just sitting around, you can put a ammo converter into this slot super, super easily, whether you have the Vigilante or not. So that's also really nice for giving you basically unlimited ammo. All that being said, this is still super, super effective. Like, you're going to notice actually very little difference between this low investment version and the high investment version. And the reason for that is because the heat procs just build up and they take care of business. You're gonna want to fire a few more times into some like highly armored enemies, but realistically, you're gonna be just fine. You like look at these enemies, just build up the heat procs, and it's not a huge deal for such a low investment build like this. It's actually so useful to be doing this. And the also nice thing for a kind of mid-game player is that the heat procs are going to CC the enemies. So if you're not at like the tankiest state, or if you're leveling a Warframe, this weapon can actually also kind of act to keep you safe from enemies that you would just not want to be shooting you in the face, which is also a really nice extra bonus of it. But yeah, very little difference between the full investment and the like very low investment on this test. The one thing that is noted here is that this will blow you back. Now, there are a number of Warframes that can mitigate that are immune to knockback, such as Rhino and Naros, any Warframe that you can fit primed sure-footed on. So I really don't see the knockback as such a big deal, because there are a good number of Warframes that'll just ignore the knockback completely, and that's probably who you're going to want to be playing if you want this big AoE damage anyway. But this weapon is just actually super solid. I was very, very surprised whenever I went through to test it, and I was like, oh, this weapon actually just kind of does work, and especially so with primed Firestorm just spreading all that damage over such a nice area now. But yeah, that is the Kuva Ogris. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.